Um, Hello, everyone. We're here today with Tracy's Keeping It Real. I'm your host, Tracey Williams-Dillard, and we're excited at the studio today. We have a guest in the room, Miss Tonya Allen, and she is the president of the McKnight Foundation, a foundation that's doing some really great work near and dear to my heart on some of the occasions of the things they're doing. So we're just going to jump right in and we're going to get started right now. So, Tonya, welcome to our
Well,
studio.
thank you for having me, Tracy. I'm really excited to be here. This is such an important institution in our community and a historic institution. So I'm grateful for your leadership for stewarding it and keeping it thriving.
Thank you so much, Tanya. And I know I keep saying one of these days I'm going to grow up and be just like you because you're running this huge organization that you're spearheading a lot of women in the organization as well. So can you talk a little bit about the McKnight Foundation and kind of what brought you here from Detroit and how that whole piece got started with you?
Sure. Well, I'm happy to. So the McKnight Foundation, you most of your listeners know, is a Minneapolis-based family foundation. We've been around a little over 70 years, and it has been an institution that is really focused on investing in Minnesota to ensure that Minnesota is a thriving place. And more recently, we have shifted and maybe honed our mission to focus on climate and equity, racial equity. And we believe that the intersection of those two issues are where we need to spend our time and energy as a community, as a society. We know that climate affects everyone, even if we don't know. Because I think a lot of times, particularly in Black communities, people talk about climate and they're like, what are you talking about, right? And for us, it's about trying to help people in communities understand how being more climate resilient is going to strengthen and improve their quality of life. It's going to improve their health. It's going to improve their economics. And it's also going to contribute to keeping our environment sustainable in a way that we can all live. I often say that, people worry about whether or not climate is going to destroy the planet. The planet will be here. Now, whether we can live on it,
Be a whole nother
is a
story.
whole different story. And so, really bringing that to real issues that people are experiencing, like what does that mean for your home? What does it mean for commercial districts? What does it mean for businesses? And then, of course, racial equity. How do we create more opportunity for people to thrive in Minnesota and really across the world? And that's what we're trying to figure out. Like, what's that intersection? What are those sweet spots that we can help people understand it? And then bring it down to the most common of understanding language, strategies, and practices so that people understand how they can benefit from doing good work at the policy level and how does that practically get down to people that we care most about.
And helping people to understand like climate and then the whole racial equity and that intersection would be interesting to figure out because I know one of the things that we do at the MSR is we like to do storytelling.
Hmm.
And one of my things when I talk to my team about the stories that we tell is the importance of making the connection. And I think when we tell stories like climate change, how we connect that to our listeners and our readers is what then makes a difference to them.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing, especially if you're really leaning in and putting work towards it and trying to make sure that Minnesotans, and now we're looking even globally more of the world, but Minnesota is your home base that you're looking at, how we make the African American community really make that connection with the climate. And we understand a lot about the economic challenges that we have because that's something unfortunately that we face a
Hmm.
lot. So hearing anybody look at opportunities to bridge the gap is exciting for me to hear. But just hearing that your initiatives are something that I think would be an interesting to continue to have that story to talk and engage more people around
Yeah.
and especially for our listeners. So, and again, the other thing too, when you made the mention of the McKnight Foundation and it being a family-ran organization, that's again another element that I like the partnership opportunities is because we are also a family
Hmm.
newspaper. So, understanding the dynamics of family is always important to me. Um, Can you talk to us a little about the purpose? So I know that you actually were the one that created this thing, and let's talk a little bit about it first. The Groundbreaking Coalition. Um, that is really to me the place that you're going with this is, I think, where the strength in the coalition is very important to our
Mhm.
community and to other communities. So can you talk a little about the Groundbreaking Coalition and how
Sure.
what made you even think about trying to bring it together?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Well, let me just say, starting with this, that the McKnight Foundation is just a storied foundation, right? Like it's invested in so many important things in this region. And I believe that there's a correlation between our investments and why I think Minnesota as a community is as strong as it is. And so, one of the things I've tried to do since I've come to the McKnight Foundation is to make sure that um, our investment in these kind of efforts that are change making, like they really create change, are not episodic, that they actually feel consistent and common when you think about the McKnight Foundation. So we really are shifting our institutional view from being just a grant maker to a change maker, right? And so Groundbreak is really one of those change making efforts. And so when I came to Minnesota, part of the reason I was attracted and wanted to come to Minnesota after George Floyd's murder is that I had worked on issues around Black men and, quite honestly, their engagements with police brutality across the country. And one of the things that I know is that when you have these kind of murders that happen in these communities and then you have the uprisings that follow, that's all you can point to
Mm-hmm.
is the uprising,
Mm-hmm.
right? Did anything fundamentally change or look different? And part of why I was drawn to Minnesota is that I wanted to make sure that, like, um, when people come back 5 years later, which we will experience that kind of 5 year review this year, um, after George Floyd's murder, that people will say that did that community actually change? Did something look or feel or is actually different for the people that live there that will actually move them from like this traumatic experience to possibly thriving? And so that's really what the Groundbreak initiative is about. We were particularly looking and trying to think about what would it take to create opportunities for people of color to grow wealth. And when we ask that question, and we ask the question to people in our communities, what they said back to us pretty specifically is like, we want to help everybody, but we particularly want to make sure that Black folks in Minnesota benefit because we owe that after the kind of tragedies that we've seen in this space. And so Groundbreak is really about bringing together all of these institutions that have money, that have capital, and making sure that they rewrite the rules, which I think is how you use power. How do you rewrite the rules to make sure that you get the outcome that you would like to achieve? And that was the proposition that we put in front of them is, can we rewrite the rules with all of the money that we have in different forms and pots to actually help Black people and then other people of color and even poor white folks in this community grow their wealth. And that's what Groundbreak became. So, financial institutions, philanthropic organizations, government entities, nonprofits who have decided that we are going to try and rewrite the financial systems in our community. And this has resulted in a $5 billion project over the next 10 years. And I would say it's probably the largest wealth building strategy in the country, right? And we're just getting started. We've been working on it for the last 2 years, building the kind of relationships, rewriting systems, raising capital. We announced last year that we raised about $1 billion, which I call the down payment on the $5 billion plan.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal is to make sure that basically Black people get into homes, that they actually buy those homes, that they have equity when they make those purchases, that if they run into trouble when they have that house and there's a risk of losing it, that they have resources that they might be able to access so that they can retain their equity, retain their ownership, and that we close that home ownership gap, which is 50 percentage points,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
50 percentage points, not 50%, that we can actually close that. And we think we can half that in the next 10 years. And then also to support businesses. There are a lot of businesses here that are trying to grow. And so this is really about one, helping those businesses get equity, strong, grow, strengthen their equity, and also have business loans that actually will be supportive and the right kind of resources so that it moves from just being kind of like a independent owner to institutions that can hire folks.
Yeah.
Right. So that we actually are growing our economy, we're growing commerce in our community. And then lastly, thinking about these cultural corridors, like you sit right in one of those historic corridors. So, how do we bring commerce into our community? How do we help developers think about bringing stronger housing options into them? How do we bring commerce into those communities so that the places that we live are more resilient, and that we can get what we need, that we can circulate that dollar into the community so that it actually is growing wealth amongst people of color versus actually always sending the money out. So I'm not going into the details of all of it, but that's been the ambition of it. And really starting thinking about it as how do we get equity into people's hands? How do, if people need to take loans, how do we get them the best absolute deals that they can have where they're not going to be discriminated when they walk through a bank institution's door? How do we, when people need kind of that kind of bridge money, that low cost patient capital that they might need to get a project done, how do we make that available to them? And then how do we get the banks to change their behavior with permanence, not through a temporary program? That's been our ambitions.
Okay, great. Now, so, and you kind of had me lead right into the end of that
Mhm.
versus where I was going to start because you mentioned banks, and my
Mhm.
thought
Yeah.
was that's the critical piece. So, do you have a lot of the banks sitting at the table?
We do. We have quite a few of the banks that have been sitting at the table with us from the beginning. And part of what we try to do at the beginning was to say to them, are you willing to rewrite the rules? Are you willing to use your power to change it? And they have been. Now, we still need to get more banks involved and more, like there are some banks where we've had less engagement. And unfortunately, some of those banks are the ones that have actually the largest number of Black folks who
Bank with them.
patronize,
Yeah,
bank with
yeah.
them. And so, I think as a community, we have to push on these institutions and tell them, you got to show up differently for us, and be smart about how we use our own capital, where we put our money. What are they doing? What are they willing to step outside of the box, or are they just really willing to give you the same stuff that they give everybody else?
Absolutely. And that's again to the work I do. It's like making sure that our community knows that these are the banks that are not our partners and these are the banks that
Yeah.
are. And I think education is another big piece. It's like who is supporting us as bankers and some of the other organizations, because Tanya and I'm not sure the crossover between a statement that was made right after George Floyd passed or got killed
Mhm.
to today.
Yeah.
But we actually wrote a letter to the editor. We ran, I should say, a letter to the editor of organizations that had the commitment that sounds very similar to the one that you're now leading the charge of. And um, I don't know for that one, I don't know a lot that was actually done. So I'd like to talk, down the road a little bit more about what well, let's talk right even now about, I know you've only been doing this for 2 years, but has there been any movement to date of what the group has accomplished that they can be proud of or?
Yeah. Well, so we take them the last couple of years. Um, and the last couple of years has been really about getting clear about what we can actually do, where do we, who the partners are, what's the money, how the money would flow and how it would act. And so now 2 years seem like a long time. Like if I were sitting on the other side of this, as a listener or audience member, I'd be like, well, that takes too long. Well, sometimes actually complex change takes a long time. So we took the time that we needed because we wanted this not to be fly by night. And so last year we started to practice and pilot a lot of the things that we were trying to do. So, for example, I think in probably about a 4 month period, we helped about 92 families in our community. Um, buy homes.
Oh,
And that was, I think it was probably an average about $40,000 of down payment assistance that went to those particular families to support them with their own savings so that they can actually have more equity in their homes. And so we've been putting those things in place. So all of our funding options will actually kick off this year. We're hoping by the beginning of Q2, when we get to that April period, all the resources are going to be available for families and wealth builders to be able to access them, to be able to support their visions, to support their dreams, to support their aspirations. So that's what we've been up to. So um, the question is this real? The answer is yes, and it'll be even realer on April 1st.
okay.
Is the
Okay.
point I would make.
Okay. And while you're creating these initiatives for Groundbreak Coalition, you mentioned at some point, I think the community. So was there a community roundtable that kind of
Yeah.
was called on, and how many members were at that? How did you go
Yeah,
about
we
choosing them?
we did a lot of community conversations. We spent time with people who were entrepreneurs. We spent time with people who were aspiring homeowners and with developers because this is who the programs are designed to support, right? And we asked them questions. So many of them were involved in the big planning, and then we had even in lots of individual sessions with people to just tell us, will this work? Does this fit your needs based on what you've already told us? And they have been, and they've basically given us feedback, and we've taken that feedback. We redesigned the models to make sure it's community responsive. Now, our job as Groundbreak, I don't think, is to go out and to talk to every community
Mm,
member. We think that that's the job of our partners,
okay.
right? So we have a lot of partners that are going to be a part of Groundbreak that help people who are already doing stuff like helping people purchase homes, helping people grow their businesses, helping people do development. That's their job to get into community
Mm,
in a deeper way because they already have the relationship. So are they talking to them? Are they bringing that to? I don't think we care if Groundbreak Coalition ever gets credit,
okay.
right? Like, I don't care if a person down the street ever knows about Groundbreak. What I care most about is that the people who are already in pursuit of their aspirations to grow wealth for their families get what they need. And that's what we've been trying to balance. Like, I think a lot of times people come out with big announcements and they want you to, pat them on the back for doing what should have been done.
Okay.
I don't want anybody to pat us on the back to say, oh, this is great. Actually, pat the people on the back who just bought a home
Right. Remember the
or
one?
that just are
Yeah.
because like they are doing the real work, and what we're trying to do is essentially create an enabling environment. And I just want, what I hope most for Groundbreak is that we create a Minnesota where people say like we should be there, right? Like that's where we should be at because they are really supporting, enabling, creating ability for people to thrive, not just to survive. And I think that's been, if I had to critique ourselves as a region, I would offer that like we sometimes are thinking about charity in the position of surviving and not necessarily thriving and building wealth. And I think we're too wealthy of a community, too wealthy of a region for us to be sitting in that spot where we're not taking advantage of this wealth and really growing it for ourselves. And we have a long history of that. Like Minnesota's business community has been so, Black business community has been so strong for so long, and then we kind of lost that communal feel. And I think we gotta strengthen that. The same work you're doing, right? Like it's how we're trying to contribute to that as well.
Nice. And I think one of the things too, we know, Tanya, and by no means do we want to overlook Groundbreak, because
Yeah,
somewhere we have to applaud people that took the initiative to bring it together.
yeah,
But I think the most important thing is for the partners that are saying, we stand with
yeah,
Groundbreak, we're a part of that initiative because we want to make the change. And then for me to be able to say as a publisher, and these are the people that are doing the work that are making it possible
got it.
for these people to buy homes. Because it's a different thing to say I'm a part of the party, if you would, but you really didn't come with the intentions on partying. You
Yeah,
came to have your name attached.
Yeah.
but you didn't come with a true commitment. So I think when we're able to really talk about the organizations that are a part of the groundbreaking and be able to show the work that they're doing and the commitment that they have, that's when people are going to want to say, I want to come to Minnesota. I want to live
Yeah.
in Minnesota. Because now we not only are hearing people say what they're going to do, we're actually seeing it.
Yeah.
We're actually witnessing more home ownership. We're actually witnessing more black businesses that are sustainable and looking at the opportunities that they have that come to them from these partners. Because I certainly um, hope that people can get loans easier and not be redlined and all the different things that they're trying to accomplish when they're trying to get a loan. But I also know that as a business owner myself, there's so many other things that we need that are outside of just borrowing money.
Right.
So that's probably the last thing we need. We need a lot of different infrastructures that are going to help us with marketing and that kind of thing. And so hopefully we got them partners at the table as
We
well,
do.
so that we're and so them are the partners that we really want to shine and talk about also in the days and years to come, because them are the ones we want to make sure people know they can access. Because I've been involved with minority discussions in different groups, and it's like if I had a mentor to take me and help me out along the way, my business would thrive right now. And to get a loan might be the end result, but to get where I'm at right now and not have the materials and the information I need, getting a loan is only going to put me in debt. So we really want to kind of figure out how we can tell them good stories about your partners that are a part of this as well, Tonya. But I do want to talk quickly just about, because I know one of the other initiatives that the McKnight Foundation is doing is the thing called Press Forward.
Hmm.
And can we talk a little bit about Press Forward and what how that was, that initiative a part of the groundbreak,
Hmm.
and what made you lean towards Press
Yeah.
Forward?
So let me say this one thing about Groundbreak. Your listeners might be thinking, like, well, why won't she just say who the partners are? And I'm happy to do it. I just don't want to go off the top of my head and then not and miss some of people who have been so
I
critical. But we're
understand.
happy to give you the list and you can flash it on the podcast or so too, Tracy. So I'm not avoiding that question. I want to make sure that. So this related to Press Forward. Our decision to invest in Press Forward is really a commitment to democracy, right? Like we see the media as an important component of our democratic community. Like it is a way that we get information, and we believe that that information has to be trustworthy, and it also needs to be grounded in community. Like there are we had for a very long time in our history, we had a few sources of truth, right? Now it's democratized. We got so many different sources of information that are flowing. Sometimes we can't tell what's true and what's not. But the great thing about it is that we got community members telling their own stories and not having to wait on traditional media to do it. And traditional media is shifting and changing to be more inclusive of the multiple stories of their various kinds of communities. So, our investment in Press Forward is really about how do we get more community media going, and how do we strengthen that media to make sure that we're getting out uh, um, sources of truth is what I would say. And so we have money, or we made a commitment over the next 5 years to be able to support media sources, to make strategic investments in them, to be able to grow them so that they can be even more effective in getting their information out, and to also sometimes combat some of the disinformation that's in communities. I think so it's really about helping Minnesota in a lot of ways rethink what would it look like for us to have a thriving media ecosystem. I hate to use that word. But how do we make sure that we got the kinds of organizations that we need to be able to get the information to the people, and in the way that the people want to get it?
Right.
Right? Like that's the key, especially with the advent and proliferation of so much social media and in different ways. So how do we get that information to people in a way that's meaningful, that people can understand it in a different way? And sometimes that's the written word. And sometimes it's, a podcast, or sometimes it's a meme, whatever it takes for us to be able to do it. I think we need the space. Our media organizations like yourself need the space to be actually be creative, and that you don't. It's hard, people are like, just innovate. Well, it's hard to innovate if you're trying to run the business and you're trying to make the numbers,
Yeah.
add up at the end of the day. So sometimes you need an extra investment that gives you the space to be able to think about what does innovation look like and how does that change this business model. So that you guys are 90 years old,
Yeah.
we want
90.
you to be around here another 90 years old. We don't want you to innovate and go out of business. We need you to innovate and strengthen your business. And so that's what Press Forward is really about. And we're trying to do that across the entire state. And trying to help people envision and strengthen their vision, and then how do we help resource that is our goal and ambition. And what how we're funding that is, like, of course, McKnight Foundation is putting grant resources in that, but we also have gotten other foundation partners across the state to make investments in this. And then we have media professionals and people who are close to the industry who are looking at this and trying to think and collaborate and make decisions collectively. So it's not us making the decisions, it's really the people who are most affected making the decisions about how and where these resources go, so that we are stronger and better together.
Nice. And I think that certainly, again, to the point of being able to really talk about who them partners are, we won't try to touch on any of that in this last few minutes that we do have today. But I certainly know that moving forward, we can definitely put some information in the paper and online about some of the partners and how people can access that. Because, and again, the 5 years that you mentioned for Press Forward, is that like just a test time? Because we know 5 years is, and
Not
although you mentioned 2 years earlier seemed like a long time, we know in business, 2 years, 5 years, even 10 years, I'm retiring in, comes fast. So how can, so is the 5 year a test time, kind of like, not,
Yeah, we're
where,
trying to see like what we can do and whether or not we feel like we have an advantage to be able to support media, right? And do we know what we're doing? We got to figure out and assess that. That's why we're really trying to rely on the media partners to help us think through this, because like, you know, honestly, you have foundations who have all of this resource, all of this power, and they come into the room and they can talk good. Hopefully, the people in the audience think I can talk good, right? Like, but talking is not the same as doing, right? And so we want to make sure that we don't ever show up in any space where we appear arrogant as if we know,
mm-hmm,
right? Like
right,
because we don't.
mm-hmm,
We have some inclinations, but most of those inclinations we have should be coming from partners, people like you who tell us, here's the problem, this is what I need. And those inclinations should grow and get better, stronger, and more sharper, so that when we make these investments in organizations, and I think of grants as investments,
mm-hmm.
that people can do and achieve what they want to achieve because we're really supporting them and listening and hearing what's going. So over that 5 years, we want to keep on learning and getting better. And if we can get better and it makes a difference, we want to be able to continue that. But 5 years is kind of the trial period to see if this makes a difference, whether or not people in community say, yeah, this has been helpful or not. Because if it isn't helpful, we shouldn't do it.
Right,
Right. Like,
exactly.
and I'm a big believer in, like, yes, it's the McKnight Foundation's resources, but I steward those resources on behalf of community. So I'm serious about making sure that those dollars have the impact. And that people, when I first got here, someone came up to me and said, like, well, McKnight should do this, it would have an impact. And we've done a lot of things that have impact, but if the community doesn't feel like it has impact, then that's a problem. So we got to get that in alignment, and that's our ambition.
Okay, great. Well, I'm looking forward to being able to kind of be a part of that journey with you, Tonya, because I certainly know, and I think this is an excellent opportunity for us to have more conversation, even when we talk about, and early in our discussion today, you mentioned about a lot of the initiative going towards specifically the African American community, understanding that we have the biggest disparities and the more underserved community than most, and how we can maybe bring some of these conversations to a different space where we can have some of our other community journalist partners just kind of talk to you and to the community about the needs that we know that we can address their needs and how we can better serve them, because I think that's the other piece is like knowing how to help, like the MSR, for example, but making sure that what the MSR is doing, it's as a response to what the community is asking for. And we're kind of in that space right now, trying to look what do we need to provide you with? We know the news and information we do is helpful, but is that really helpful? What is it that we can really, what stories do you need us to tell, and knowing that will help strengthen us because now we're strengthening the community. So it all kind of
Yeah.
comes together with our partners, the print, the digital, all the things we're doing, and then the community benefits from all of that. So I think the work you're doing, I commend you. I just want to know we're out of time. I just wanted you to, if you'd like to recap, share anything at the end. I know you were doing some initiatives that are going to happen in April that involve the community being able to be a part of it. You want to touch on that real quick, Tonya?
Yeah, so I'll just do a couple things. One is know that Groundbreak is coming, and you can look at the website for Groundbreak Coalition. Resources will be available, around April. So if you are looking to buy a house, build a business, or actually build buildings and community, this is a place that you can go for resources, and you will get connected to community partners that are already doing that work that will partner with Groundbreak so that you can get access to those resources. Second thing is that I think what you were referring to is that we are moving our building. So we had been in our last building for the last 20 years. We come, May-ish, we will have a building opening. And part of why we are moving our space is because we actually want it to be more available to our partners, to our grant partners, to our community members, and to have that space exemplify our mission. So this is a climate friendly building. It's a green building. And we want people to be able to see that, yes, you can do this as a retrofit purposefully, because we want people to see and understand you can do that, but also to make sure that people have access to studios, workspace, community space that tells them that this is ours. This isn't just like the McKnight Foundation. So that's really important to us that we exhibit our mission, that we create space for people to dream big together and work on ideas that are going to help us as a region, as a state, to grow. And then lastly, we always have, we're a big arts and culture funder. And we always have fellowships that are available every single year, to people who identify as artists or culture bearers in our community. And so we want to make sure that people who want those opportunities understand where our fellowships are. I think we do about 100 a year, and it's from every kind of discipline you can imagine, from dance to uh, cultural practices, to uh, uh, physical. I'm blanking on the word I want to use. Um, Fine arts. So there are a lot of different opportunities, from playwriting to all kinds of things, is the point I'm trying to make. And so I want people to know that those opportunities are available to them if they want to strengthen um, their uh, their work as artists. And the last thing I would say about that is why this is important to me is because I see artists as the people who narrate and shepherd us. They help us understand the past, they help us diagnose the present, and they help us really see the vision for the future. And so we need as many diverse voices and people working on that to help us create a vision that we can all galvanize behind. And I think that that's a particularly important role of artists.
Nice. And so with that, how are we getting that message out? How do people know that they, if I'm an artist and I'm hearing this right now, how am I going to find out about that, or how am I going to share this information with my kids down the road, or
Yeah.
how are we going to get that
Yeah, they
information to
can
them?
just go to our website at McKnight.org, and there's an arts and culture section, and they have fellowships. We have fellowships. We have lots of the our partners who work particularly in each of these disciplines. They run the fellowships, but you can find it on our website. You can apply to those fellowships at those organizations, is what I would say.
Okay, great. Well, I certainly want to make sure that we'll make all this information available to our listeners today and to our readers so that beyond today, people will know how to access all the great things you're doing. Keep track of what's going on with the Groundbreak Coalition and all the wonderful things that the McKnight Foundation is doing to really help build and strengthen Minnesota. And now even looking beyond and reaching out to other communities across the country is really an exciting thing. So I wish we had more time because we got so many more things that we could be talking about right now to really get the our listeners excited about being able to be a part of what's yet to come. But if we can have you back, we'd love to have you back to talk more about it. And again, maybe one day we can even have the whole partners come together, our community partners, and we can have the same conversation. So
Oh, I would love that. It would be our great privilege to be able to hear from partners and hear from other community members. We try and do it as much as we can. And it's never enough, even
never
if so we're always happy to do that. And I would appreciate the opportunity.
nice, and that's something we could even consider in the new space
Yeah.
in
All right.
when you open in your studio like ours today. So certainly want to thank Tonya for joining us this afternoon and sharing with us the information what the McKnight Foundation is doing and some of their initiatives. We know that a lot of these nonprofits and foundations and organizations, corporations need to support our community. It's the financial backing that makes the strength and gives us equitable opportunities within the communities of color when people like the McKnight Foundation step up and really help put their money where their mouth is. So we want to really thank them for the work that they're doing. Want to thank Tonya for coming out and talking to us and sharing with us. And we want to ask that the other rest of the community steps up and really leans in and puts their money where their mouth is as they support the initiatives that are important to our communities. So, with all that, I want to thank you, Tonya, for coming out today and being on Tracy's Keeping It Real. And we look forward to having you again. And in the meantime, thank you so much for listening and checking in. Make sure to look us up on YouTube, on Facebook, and also check us out on MSR website to find out more about how you can find us. Thank you so much for checking in today. Until next time.